I think I just uploaded a video recently, and I might have mentioned that if there is an emotion that you've been avoiding, or you're doing your best not to acknowledge that you've been feeling that way, that might actually be the key to your emotional freedom. And here's why I say that. First, it's something that I actually noticed within myself over the past over nearly 2 decades of being on this healing journey. Yes, I have been on this journey for about for almost 20 years. I started really young, but then I never really took it seriously until COVID hit. Not because I had so much time in my hands, rather, I feel like my higher self has been pawing at me, and I was just too busy prioritizing optics and people pleasing and seeking validation, because it's worked for me so far. But then when it stopped working, that's when I couldn't find a way out of it. Like every shortcut, every detour, every way that I wanted to take to avoid acknowledging that things aren't working for me and that things are getting very difficult, and I wasn't feeling that good inside. I was hurting from all the efforts that I am putting out and nothing is working. Just like hitting closer to rock bottom. And then I was just like, you know what, I'm just gonna surrender. This has happened to me before, and back then it was way, way worse. But right now, I think that this is exactly what I need. I need to stop trying, because it was starting to feel like being in a quicksand. The more I moved, the more I sunk. So I was just like, you know what, I'm just gonna sit still and then surrender. So once I started to be emotionally honest with myself, that I'm feeling this is how hurt I am right now, this is what's not working for me. Suddenly, not only did I start to feel better, but I feel like some pathways in my brain started to clear up, and now I'm actually able to think of solutions, not to act on them, but it was just making itself known that you have options, that you can get out of this. But at this moment, what's calling out for you is to deconstruct your internal infrastructure, because it's not strong foundationally. It was very clear that what I needed to do was to completely restructure my core framework internally. And that's what the last 5 years have been. So now, why am I bringing this up? It's because I just noticed that after making the video yesterday on how exhausted I am, suddenly I feel better. I have more energy. I have so many ideas. It's like a blockage was removed, and I can think again, and I can speak again. I was really struggling, like for real. It's like I had to do multiple takes for a very simple video, and then the words just won't come out. And if they came out, they didn't sound right. It was like it took multiple tries until I was able to, but it was like pulling teeth. So now I think it's able to flow more freely, and I guess I didn't know this at that time, but maybe I didn't give myself the chance to admit that I was exhausted, because I guess there's still a part of me that thinks that wanting rest is lazy. I guess a residue from my hustle and grind culture. If I rest and I say I'm exhausted when I haven't even done anything physically, it's because I'm lazy. But then I am completely disregarding the fact that I also have a ton of mental and emotional load. So maybe that was what's blocking me and making me feel exhausted. Because the minute that I made that video and I said I'm exhausted, I was able to sleep soundly, My naps were sufficient, and then I was able to complete my workout without thinking at the back of my head that, oh, I have to wake up this early to do all this workout. So if I'm always so tired, I can't give my 100%, and if I give my 100%, then it feels like I have to rest a few more days to just recover. But I think that what I learned from 20 years ago about acknowledging what I'm feeling helped me regain my freedom and my energy, help me access my energetic baseline when I'm not constantly arguing with my brain that I'm tired. Apparently, this is called affect labeling. Apparently, in neuroscience, affect labeling is when I say something like, I'm exhausted. My prefrontal cortex activates and begins regulating the amygdala, which is responsible for emotional stress signals. And by labeling that emotion, it reduced my psychological stress responses. So, in other words, the moment that I acknowledged the exhaustion, my brain moved from diffusing stress signals, vague body discomfort, or unprocessed internal tension into clarity, recognition, and regulation. So, sometimes the body is never truly depleted. It's just holding tension that hadn't been acknowledged just yet. And then once the signal has been received, the system relaxes. When we avoid and ignore a feeling, the brain keeps amplifying. The brain will keep amplifying the signal, the stress signal, to get our attention. It's like imagine your phone continuously buzzing with notifications, and it is only when the minute that we say, okay, I see you, I'm exhausted, then the nervous system interprets that as, okay, message delivered. So the signal begins to quiet down, reduces, it silences. And this is kind of similar sometimes when people cry, and then after you feel lighter, because the emotion was not meant to stay forever. It was meant to be recognized and processed. Like I said earlier, exhaustion isn't always just physical. Sometimes it can be decision fatigue, or you're just tired of the constant internal resistance. So before you're able to acknowledge it, there can be a few subtle frictions in the background, like pushing yourself way too much, or questioning your energy, fighting the feeling. Like I said, if I say that I'm exhausted, then I'm lazy, and then so I push myself to do more, and then I'm questioning, like, are you really tired, or you just don't want to do anything, stuff like that. Internal resistance itself consumes energy. The moment that I said I'm exhausted, the mental friction dissolved. So when there's less resistance, that means there is more available energy, because I'm not using it to fight myself. I also found out that there's actually research in somatic psychology showing that interoceptive awareness can regulate the autonomic nervous system. So if you're somebody who regularly checks in with your body, you tend to recover from stress faster. Your system does not stay stuck in sympathetic activation, which is fight or flight. So essentially, I did the micro version of that I paused, I listened, I acknowledged, and that is why my system recalibrated. If we were to approach it in an intuitive way, sometimes the body is not asking for rest. Sometimes it is asking for honesty. So when we work way too hard to override our internal signals, energy gets tied up in the act of overriding. But when we acknowledge what is present, the body will no longer need to hold that tension that was trying to get our attention. So once we stop overriding and start acknowledging, the energy that we spent on overriding will come back to us. And it's not because the exhaustion wasn't real at all. It's just that the stress signal finally completed its job, or the internal signal finally completed its job. And the thing is, external fatigue and a signal asking to be acknowledged or noticed, they can feel identical when it's in our body, but they do have different outcomes once we do the work to acknowledge it. Okay, so I'm talking too much about exhaustion, my exhaustion. So why don't we try to relate to it with emotions? So let's just say somebody broke your heart, somebody betrayed you 5 years ago, and you're still feeling the pain of that betrayal and heartbreak, that you're having a difficult time trusting people or getting into okay, relationships or friendships. Okay, let's focus on one type of relationship. Let's just say it's a romantic relationship and you were betrayed and you were heartbroken. You might get into a relationship again, but you will find it difficult to trust, and then it ends up the same way that it did last time in your last relationship. And then now, not only did you create a self-fulfilling prophecy, but then you've made a decision based on a past memory that probably expired so long ago. We will talk about self-fulfilling prophecies another day, but right now I want to talk about this this idea from Jill Bolt, where she says that emotion stays in our system for 90 seconds. So maybe a lot of information have been simplified online, but if you think about it, if the emotion stays for only 90 seconds, why is it that other people still carry it for months, years? I always like to say the emotion that's supposed to pass after 90 seconds stays longer than that, then it has a higher chance to become a habit. And now you have a habit of acting like you're still hurt. If you continue to operate in this habit, then now that habit starts to become part of your identity. It becomes character. And once you keep living in that identity, there is a chance that it could dictate your destiny, because then based on your identity, we often make decisions not just based on our feelings and values, but sometimes people make decisions based on who they are. And if being hurt, being heartbroken, being betrayed is part of your identity, you're essentially declaring that I'm just the type of person that gets hurt and betrayed all the time. The stuff that you say is like, I'm just not lucky with romantic partners, you're just not lucky in love, stuff like that. What I just said right now could have just been a simplified version, okay, based on my own interpretation and the stuff that I read. And it probably doesn't do the actual process any, or research any justice. So we can flesh it out right now. When something triggers an emotion, stress hormones, neurotransmitters, our heart rate changes. That's like a chemical cascade in the body, and usually it runs its course in roughly 60 to 90 seconds, right? That part is biological. After that window, something else happens, and it's very important. So the body is no longer sustaining the emotion by chemistry alone. Now it is being sustained by thought. So now the sequence looks like this. Event happens, the body reacts, chemical emotions surge. 90 seconds later, the chemistry fades. And then now the mind keeps replaying the story. And then the story triggers the body again. And now the loop becomes thought, body reaction. Thought, body reaction. When I was a kid, I was always told that because I am so rebellious that I will never get anything that I want. I will never succeed. And that I would probably have a hard time looking for somebody to love me. So, but I was a kid when they said that. I never knew anything about these. This is stay with me. So if I had the emotional toolkit during that age to process that in a healthy way, ideally what would have happened is that my body reacted, and then 90 seconds later it passed, and my mind no longer replayed the story. But sad to say that at that age I was not equipped with the emotional intelligence to handle that. So now I kept it to myself. So now it stays in my head rent free. And then back then I would think that I will show you, I will prove everybody that you are wrong. So I used that as a chip in my shoulder. So now every time I think about it, my body reacts. I'm feeling hurt again. I'm feeling angry. Not only because I wasn't able to defend myself, but because like, how dare you talk to me like that? How dare you write my future for me? And then it gets replayed again, and then I get angrier and angrier. And this loop now is called rumination. In one of my videos I mentioned this. There came a point when I thought to myself, like, these desires that I'm chasing after, are they really mine? And when I realized that not only were they not mine, they were not just conditioned to me or instilled to me, but they were mostly desires from the place of revenge, because I wanted to show people and prove them wrong. And when I acknowledge that that's it, it's like, oh, okay, so these aren't actual desires of my heart and my soul. These are just like out of the pain that I've carried through the years. You know what? That is a game I never wanted to play. I never consented to that. I never accepted the terms. Okay, it doesn't matter if I lose by quitting that game. I'm no longer playing. So in that sense, I did acknowledge the feeling and the source of the desire and the truth behind it. I ended the unconscious loop that way. So instead of saying like, what else can I do to show these people that they're wrong about me, that I'm not doomed, that my future is bright, I shifted into just, I don't want these because these aren't my desires, these aren't real desires. I quit, and I'm gonna start playing my own game based on my own wants and needs, based on what is aligned with me, and based on what feels good for me. Those statements did three things to me neurologically. It named the source, which activated my prefrontal cortex. It stopped the mental argument with whatever I was feeling and whatever was driving me. And then it allowed my nervous system to complete the stress cycle.